I've been talking out loud, thinking out loud, a little bit about what it means to be Anglican, thinking out loud, at least here in this context, over the last few weeks. And fundamentally, there are many ways that you could look at what it means to be Anglican, but the way I tend to think about it is Anglican is a combination of what we believe as Reformed Christians, how we worship or how we practice our faith as Christians, and then I think thirdly, how we govern ourselves. And I want to talk particularly today about how we worship, what our practice is. One of the things that's central to Anglican worship is the Book of Common Prayer. The Book of Common Prayer is, I think, a great gift to the Church. And I think certainly the world, it's certainly the literary world, the Book of Common Prayer is very, very familiar. So familiar, in fact, that if you look at movies, Hollywood movies, and there's a wedding, it begins like, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here." And that's straight from the pages of the Book of Common Prayer. And so it is this great treasure that has been given to us. Now, common in this phrase, the Book of Common Prayer, is not to mean like common versus uncommon or common versus extraordinary, the Book of Extraordinary Prayer. It's not that kind of common. It's common in the sense of a prayer that we have in common, that is familiar and embraced by all of us. This is part of the genius that Archbishop Cranmer had when he put together the original Book of Common Prayer, is that if you go to an Anglican service anywhere, you're getting a Book of Common Prayer service. You're getting something that is recognizable and familiar. And that's true to this day. If you go to a service in Kenya or an Anglican service in South Africa, or perhaps even somewhere in the Midwest of the United States, it is recognizably Anglican in the Book of Common Prayer. It is our prayer in common, and it is recognizable and understandable and comfortable in that sort of way. And indeed, this is important because we as Anglicans really fundamentally believe how we pray shapes how we believe and how we behave. And our prayers are indeed kind of a formational tool for us. So the Book of Common Prayer not only is a manual for helping us run a service, but it's also a tool for formation of Christian belief and Christian understanding. How we pray really indeed dictates how we believe and what we believe. And so that's why the Book of Common Prayer really matters. The other thing about our worship, of course, in the Book of Common Prayer is it's liturgical. Liturgical means that there are responses and prompts and responses from the pastor to the people, and the people respond back and forth. And it's kind of the regular same thing sort of every Sunday. And that is because liturgy is, what it actually means is the work of the people. It's not the work of the pastor. It's not just the pastor that's engaged in this. It's the work of the people. And so the people need to respond. It's really easy for us, in some context perhaps, to sort of understand worship as kind of a consumer event or something that I'm watching rather than something that I'm engaged in. But worship isn't that. Worship is the engagement of people with what's going on. So the liturgical reality is it invites people, indeed it expects people, the people, to be engaged in the worship of the church. It's not just the pastor saying something. We're all saying something in response. And that's one of the strengths of, I think, liturgical worship. Some people suggest that it might be problematic because, don't you get bored saying the same thing every week? And the answer is yes, sometimes we do. But I have been in non-liturgical services where I've been bored as well, so it's not just the liturgy is the problem. Sometimes the problem is our attitudes and what we bring to the table. But the liturgical reality is actually something that's comfortable and known and anticipated. And as such, it is something, because it's comfortable and known, brings us, I think, more easily into the presence of God. The third thing I'd like to say about sort of our liturgical worship is really around the church calendar, which is this thing that we kind of observe, fundamentally the major events of Jesus' life every year in the church calendar, beginning with Advent, Christmas, his incarnation, Epiphany, and Lent, Easter, Ascension Tide, and then Pentecost and the season after Pentecost. This calendar, which is built into the Book of Common Prayer, it just shapes and forms us because it focuses us on a regular basis on these major events in the life of Jesus. It is as such something that teaches us. It's a pedagogical tool to help people understand more and more about the faith and who Jesus is and what we understand and what he has done. And so those are the really kind of these central events, like his birth and at Christmas, his death and resurrection at Good Friday and Easter, his ascension, And the Advent actually talks about sort of his coming again in glory. And all of these sorts of things are these major events that help us understand our faith, help us teach the faith as we go along. As you can imagine, as an Anglican bishop, I'm a huge fan of the Book of Common Prayer. It has shaped and formed my life. And one of the things that I would just want to say in closing about it is the liturgy, the Book of Common Prayer, is for us as Anglicans that comfortable sweater that we slip on every week. We get into it. It's recognizable. It looks the same. It smells the same. It is the same. It always is. So it becomes this comfort to us that enables us to relax as we come to worship and enter into fundamentally the worship and the praise of God, which is the point of what gathering together ultimately means. If you've never experienced an Anglican service, you could certainly take a look at the Book of Common Prayer, but I would recommend rather seeing the incarnated reality of it and go to an Anglican church, watch them worship, experience it together with us.